I bring you tonight a Cree story. It was taught to me by Ron Evans, and I tell it tonight at his request. Once, long ago, there lived an old man and an old woman who were bent and white-haired with the snows of many winters. And they lived in that far north country where the winter nights are endless and the snow lies deep. And one winter, the white giant came with a vengeance they had never known before. The winter winds howled, and the snow grew deeper and deeper. And one by one, all of the animals began moving away to the south to escape those howling winds and that endless snow. And finally, though the old man went hunting every day, soon the house was empty, and he, the old woman, began to starve. After 3 days with nothing to eat, the old man and woman woke up one morning, and there was just enough wood left to build one good hot fire. And the old man said, "Old woman, I know today I will find something for us to eat, and I'll need that wood to build a fire to cook it with. So you just wait here for me until I return." And he went on out to hunt. Well, that old woman, she'd never been a very nice old woman to begin with. And what with 3 days of nothing to eat and all of this snow, she wasn't in a very good mood. She said, "That old man thinks I can stay here in the cold while he goes hunting. I'm going to build me a fire. And if he wants another fire when he comes home, he can just go out and find more wood." So she took all of that wood and she built it up into a great roaring fire, and she stood over it, warming her hands. But she got one hand a little too close to the fire and burned it and popped it in her mouth. She went, "Oh!" After 3 days with nothing to eat, that burned finger tasted pretty good. So she began chewing on it. And then she put her whole hand in the fire and she cooked that, and she ate it. And pretty soon, she was just gnawing away without even bothering to cook it until she'd eaten herself all up. And she was nothing but a rattly old skeleton. And she was still hungry. So she went into the corner and she hid. And pretty soon her old man came home carrying a deer across his back. And he said, "Old woman, you built a fire. How am I going to cook this deer I caught?" And a voice from the shadows said, "That's all right. I like my meat raw." And here she came, a pile of bones rattling out of the corner, headed straight for that old man, going, That old man screamed and began to run. But that old skeleton was right behind him, and he was an old man, and he couldn't run very fast or very far, and all the time coming right behind him were the bones rattling of that skeleton. Until finally, he came to a place where a canyon stretched deep below and a river went by, and it was too far to jump across, and he just knew that skeleton would have to eat him up. But there was a house on the edge of that cliff and a little old magic woman living there. And that old man ran up to that magic woman and said, "Can you help me? There's a skeleton chasing me." And the little magic woman said, "First, you have to pick me some berries and chop me some firewood." Well, he knew he didn't have very much time, so he picked those berries just as fast as he could, and he chopped that wood just as fast as he could, and that little old magic woman stood on the edge of that cliff and said some magic words and fell, and her body stretched and grew until it was a bridge that reached to the other side of that cliff. And the old man very carefully stepped across her back to the other side, and then she drew up and shrank back to normal. And just at that moment, here came that skeleton, bones just a-rattling. And she saw that old man on the other side of the cliff, and she saw that little magic woman, and she said, "You get me across to that old man." And the little magic woman said, "First, you have to pick me some berries and chop me some firewood." But the skeleton said, I don't have time to pick your berries or chop your wood. You get me across to that old man or I'll eat you. Well, that little magic woman stood at the edge of the cliff and said those magic words, and her body began to stretch, and the old man said, she's helping that skeleton get over here to me. And he knew that he was dead because he could not run another step. And when the little magic woman was a bridge to the other side, the skeleton began walking across her back. And as she reached the middle of her back, the old woman called, now I'm making my back all loose and flimsy. She began to sway and flop her body around, and the skeleton lost its balance and toppled all the way down to the bottom of the cliff and broke into a pile of bones. Now that little old man lived there at the edge of the cliff with the little old magic woman. And it is said that to this very day, if you walk to the edge of that cliff, way far below, as the river runs over the rocks, you'll hear the sound. And it's said that it's the bones of that old woman trying to pull themselves back together and find a way to get up to the top of that cliff. And the Lord help us all if she should ever find it.
The Ghoul. The gruesome ghoul, the grizzly ghoul,
without the slightest noise,
waits patiently beside the school to feast on girls and boys.
He lunges fiercely through the air as they come out to play,
then grabs a couple by the hair and drags them far away. He cracks their bones and snaps their backs and squeezes out their lungs.
He chews their thumbs like candy snacks and pulls apart their tongues.
He slices their stomachs and bites their hearts and tears their flesh to shreds. He swallows their toes like toasted tarts and gobbles down their heads.
Fingers, elbows, hands and knees and legs and arms and feet, he eats them with delight and ease, for every part's a treat.
And when the gruesome grizzly ghoul has nothing left to chew,
he hurries here and waits,
perhaps for you. The Ghoul, Jack Berlutsky. Thank you.
Near the little South Alabama town of Newton, way out in the woods, not near a house, not near a path. There's a hole, and you can fill that hole with dirt or trash or leaves and go away and come back, and you find that hole swept out clean. Now, I don't know what sweeps that hole out clean, but the people who live around there say that it is the ghost of Bilskito. Bilskito was a Methodist preacher. He lived down in South Alabama in the 1850s and served a circuit of 5 Methodist churches. And when the war between the states came, Bilskito was drafted into the Confederate Army. He was sent to Virginia with his unit to fight, and it was while he was in Virginia that he got word that his wife was very ill back down at Newton. He knew there was no one to help nurse her, so he did what was often done in those days. He paid someone to take his place in the army so he could go home to see about his wife. Well, when he got home, he found that she was indeed very ill, and he had to stay a long time nursing her. And he stayed so long that people began to talk about him. They began to whisper a little bit first and say, you know, seems to me Miss Skito's well enough for Brother Skito to go back and join his unit. Then they began to say, you know, I'm afraid Brother Skito may be a coward. Looks like to me he's scared to fight. And then they began to say the worst thing that could be said about an able-bodied man in the South in 1864. They began to say, Bilskito has deserted from the Confederate Army. He's a deserter. He's a deserter. And that rumor spread all through the communities down there until it reached the ears of a man named Captain Berea. And Captain Berea was in charge of the Home Guard, and it was his duty to keep law and order and to see that no Confederate deserters were allowed there, and he took his duties very seriously. And Captain Berea said, well, if he has deserted, we will give him the proper punishment. So one morning, Bilskito had been into Newton to get some medicine for his wife. And he was walking home through the woods carrying this bottle of medicine when a man whom he knew very well stopped him in the path and said, "Good morning, Brother Skito. I hope you're feeling well." Well, nobody had been friendly to him in a long time, and this pleased Bilskito, and he stopped to talk to this friend. And the friend said, "I do hope your good wife is getting better." And then Bilskito really was pleased because nobody had even inquired about his wife in weeks. And he began to tell this man how his wife was, when all of a sudden out from the bushes behind him there jumped 5 men, and they grabbed Bilskito and they tied his hands behind his back, and they tied his feet together and they threw him down there in that dirt. And they began to kick him and curse him and abuse him and say, "Bilskito, you're a deserter and we're going to hang you." Bilskito said, "But I'm not a deserter. I paid somebody to take my place in the army, and I'm going back just as soon as my wife is able for me to leave her. And if you hang me here, you will never forget this spot." But they wouldn't listen to him. And they threw him in the back of a buggy. And in that buggy, there was a long, thick rope. And there was a noose in one end of that rope. And they slipped that rope over Bilskito's head and around his neck. They threw the other end over a big oak tree limb, and they tied it tight. And then they said, "Bilskito, is there anything you want to say before you die?" And Bilskito said again, "I'm innocent. And if you hang me here, you will never forget this spot." And then he began to pray for those men who were going to take his life. He knew them all, and he looked into the face of each man and called him by name as he asked God to forgive him. And that was more than their consciences could bear. And one of them reached down quickly and he picked up a stick and he hit the horse a lick with that stick, and that horse bolted, and it should have jerked Bilskito out of that buggy and killed him. But they had forgotten how tall Bilskito was. And his toes touched the ground, just enough to keep that noose from tightening around his neck. But in that group of men, there was a man named George Eccles who was crippled. And George Eccles took his crutch, and he used it like a shovel to dig a hole under Bilskito's feet so that his toes could not touch the ground. And then that noose tightened around his neck, and he died there in the woods that November day. They say those men got in the buggy and they rode to the Skito house, and they stopped at the front gate, and one of them called out, "Miss Skito, if you want your husband, he's hanging from that oak tree down near the river." And they say Miss Skito got up out of her sick bed, and she had to walk 5 miles before she could find anybody who would go with her to cut her husband's body down and prepare it for burial. And they laid him out first in a cotton house that was close by, and then they buried him at the Mount Carmel Methodist Cemetery. And you can see his grave there today in that sandy, windswept cemetery. An impressive granite marker with his name and the date of his birth and the date of his death. And if you know somebody in Newton, they will take you out into the woods and show you the spot where Bilskito was hanged, because that hole that was dug by the crutch of a cripple 118 years ago is still right there. And you can fill it with whatever you would like to fill it with, and go away and come back and find that the ghost of Bilskito has swept that hole out clean. Thank you. Now, you're not ever to be frightened by ghost tales, and I want to give you this reassuring word at this point. If you feel uneasy when you go to bed at night, this is straight from our Southern folklore. If you will put your shoes under the edge of your bed with one toe pointing toward the wall and one toe in the opposite direction, you will be safe all night long. You will never be afraid of anything. You can go right to sleep no matter what kind of scary thing you read or hear or see. So remember that.
All peoples have a dialect. I bring you a very old dialect in the story of a very wicked man, dead Aaron. Aaron Kelly dead. So they bury him. Fare you well, Aaron Kelly. They sitting round that night round the fire, hoping the dead deceased is where they know he ain't got one earthly chance of going. And his widow says, I hopes the dead deceased. It's where I expects he ain't. When in walks Aaron Kelly looking dusty, oh my lordy. And he take him a seat twixt the widow and the lead mourner. And Aaron Kelly say, what's this shit going on here? Look like y'all done lost me. Look like somebody dead. Who dead? She said, oh my Lord. Doggone it, woman, I asked you. Who dead? Who dead? You dead. Me dead? How come? I don't feel dead a doggone bit. All right, she said. I don't care how who say who don't feel dead, who looks dead all right. And who better go on back to the grave where you belongs. Look here, woman. Ain't going back to no grave till I feels dead, and that's that. So just stop all your argument. Ain't gonna be no argument. And so Aaron Kelly just sit there by the fire, warm in his hands and warm in his foot, and chilling off the room. And he said, look here, you say I'm dead. Ain't you gonna mourn for me? Mourn for who? I gonna mourn for who, and who ain't gone nowhere. I could mourn for who that easy. Now look here, you ain't treating me right. Ain't you kind of miss me? Miss who? I gonna miss who? Who ain't gone nowhere. I could miss who that easy, I could. Now look here, when I married you, you promised to be a good wife for me, and you ain't giving me no proper attention. Ain't getting no proper attention. Ain't us done had a good funeral for who? And ain't us done had to find sermon over who? And ain't us done bury you? Who think us gonna bury you twice? Go ahead and quit your complaining. And Ann Kelly just sat there, warm in his hands and warm in his foot. And you know what? The insurance company won't pay no insurance because Aaron Kelly swear to God he ain't dead. And the family can't pay for no coffin. They ain't got no insurance money. And the undertaker, he gonna grab the coffin back because the dead deceased won't occupy the coffin. Oh, there's the very devil to pay. And they present all these facts to Aaron. Aaron Kelly said, I don't care what you say, ain't going back to no grave till I feels dead. And she said, oh my Lord, how long is your corpse gonna last? And the lead mourner said, can't last long because it's too hot. But despite the weather, the heat, the rain, Aaron Kelly lasts. They sat there by the fire, warm in his hands and warm in his foot and chilling off the room. Well, about that time, there comes the best fiddler in the county. He come a-coating the widow. So he come sit on one side of the fire, and the widow and Ann on the other side of the fire. And Ann Kelly just sat there, and she said, how long this year corpse gonna last? Well, the fiddler, he sitter, and he tried to side, but you know, sittering inside and making Sal's baby no shape. And so, Ann Kelly just sat down. After a while, he said, you know what? This be a very dreadful, dry situation. This ain't very Joby. Let's be Joby. Let's just have us a tune and dance a while. Well, the fiddler picked up his fiddle. He began to play a tune. And oh, that fiddle began to sing. And oh, Ann Kelly, he shake himself. and he move around, and he stretch himself, and he get up, and he take one step, and he take another step, and then he begin to dance. Oh, with a bone head a wackling, and the arms a flip-flopping up and down around the room. Oh, he danced and he pranced, and he was just dancing up and down and round the room, and the fiddler said, oh, my Lord, look at that. She said, play faster, man, play faster. And the fiddler played faster, and old Aaron Kelly danced up and down, and oh, his old bones are cracking, and his long knees are shacking, and he's a going up and down and around, and after a while, a piece of bone drop on the floor. Oh, my Lord, said the fiddler. Play more louder, says the widow. And then the old Aaron Kelly, he keep on a-dancing, and every time he moves, it creak, it crack, and up and back, another bone drop off, and fiddler said, oh, my Lord, his hands are shaking, so she said, man, play faster, play faster. And he plays, and Aaron Kelly keep on a-dancing, and every time he move, another bone drop, here a bone, there a bone, this away, that away, the bones keep a-drapping, and after a while, the bones just piling up there, nothing but an old rib cage, just a-bouncing on the floor. And Aaron Kelly said, oh, ain't we a-having fun? And then the old fiddler said, look here, I don't like it. She said, play more louder, man, play more louder. And then after a while, all them bones go, but that old head keep on a-dancing. And oh, the head just a-flopping, and them long yellow teeth just a-snapping, and the head just a-clapping along there, you know? And then with the yellow teeth tells the fiddler, ain't us cutting the buck? Ain't us having some fun? And the fiddler ain't got no use for no head that act like that head. He said, look here, widow, I need some more rosin for my bowl. And he left that place. I guess he ain't found it yet because he ain't come back. And the widow, she's a widow still. But this time, when old Aaron Kelly's all collapsed in the middle of the floor, they take his bones, take that casket, they lay him in crissy-crossy, you know. He can't tell what bone come first. And out of that, he ain't come back no more.
There was once a woodcutter who went to the same forest every day to chop wood. He used to chop long pieces of wood and tie them together, and he'd sell them in the market. He did the same things every single day. He walked down the same pathways. He knew all the trees and the small creatures. But one day, as he was walking, he heard a strange sound. And he looked, and there beneath the leaves was a bamboo trap, and in that trap were captured 2 white birds. Oh, poor birds, said the woodcutter. If I don't set you free, you will die. So he opened that trap, and he let the 2 white birds fly away. And he went his way, and after some time, he forgot all about the birds. And 25 years passed, and the woodcutter got married, and he had 2 children, and they moved far away from that forest. Until one morning, he woke up, and he said to his wife, you know, I think I'd like to go back to that forest and remember the days when I used to chop wood. And she said, all right, but remember, come home before it's dark. Well, he went to the forest, and it was just as he remembered. There were the pathways and the trees, even the small creatures that he knew so well. He was comfortable, and he began to walk through the forest, and he walked until noon. He should have come to the other side of the trees. But the forest had grown so much bigger in those 25 years, so he just kept walking. And he walked, and he walked, until he realized late in the afternoon that he was lost. Well, he kept walking through the forest, but the trees grew closer together. and he was cold and hungry, and it began to grow dark. Well, if I can't find my way out, I'll just sleep in the forest and I'll find my way home in the morning. Well, he kept going until it was too dark to walk, and then he lay down beneath a tree, when suddenly in the distance he saw the light of a house. Why, that's strange. No one used to live in this forest. I'll go and ask if I could have something to eat and spend the night. So he went to the door and he knocked on it. And the door opened. A chill ran down the woodcutter's back. For standing there was the strangest woman that he'd ever seen. She had long, straight black hair that hung to her knees. Her skin was so white, it looked like paper. And her eyes were so bright, as if they were on fire. Why, he would have run away. But the food that she was cooking smelled so good.
Can I help you?
Oh, I just wondered if I could come in and have something to eat and spend the night.
Come right in.
And she shut the door. That chill went down the woodcutter's back. But the food that she was cooking smelled so good. The woodcutter sat down at the table and she gave him 3 bowls of food, one of rice, one of vegetables, one of sweet meat. He was so hungry, he began to eat. He ate everything in the bowls, and he finished it and thought he would ask that woman for more food. But when he stood up, she was no longer in the room. Then he heard a sound. And there by his feet, curled up about itself 3 times, lay a thick, red snake. And it began to unwind and stand straight on its tail. And when it looked at the woodcutter, it had the face of that woman.
I have waited for you for 25 years. Do you remember those 2 white birds that you set free? They were mine, and I swore that I would kill you.
I never knew they were yours. I would never have set them free.
No matter. By midnight tonight, I will swallow you.
Well, please, in every story that I've ever heard, there's always a way to save oneself. Isn't there something I could do?
Why, yes. There is one thing. In this forest, there is an old temple with a bell that has not been rung for 200 years. If you ring that bell 12 times before midnight, you can go free. But if you do not, I will kill you.
Well, I think I'll just get out of here and find that temple as fast as I can. And the woodcutter went to the door. But the snake slid up the door and said,
But you cannot leave this house.
If I cannot leave the house, how can I ring the bell?
Why, that is
What could he do? He sat down at the table. He tried to imagine the temple. He tried to think the bell to ring. But nothing happened. So he realized he was going to die. Then he heard the snake slide along the floor. And she curled about herself 3 times. And she watched him with one eye open. He thought of every day of his life. He thought of his children and his wife. And then he closed his eyes and waited to die. At 5 minutes to midnight, he heard the snake. She began to unwind. She slid along the floor, and she twisted up the leg of the table, and she opened her second eye and looked straight into the woodcutter's face. When all of a sudden, he heard a sound in the distance. Then he heard it again. It was the bell. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. In that moment, the house vanished, and the snake disappeared in thin air, and he was standing alone. Why, who rang the bell? Who saved me? He went to search for that temple, and not far from where the house had stood, he found an old stone door covered with ivy, and he opened it. And there within was the temple. And there hung that old bell. Well, he walked around and around, but there was no one there. And it looked like it had not been rung in 200 years. Until he noticed at the very edge of the bell, white feathers and blood. And lying beneath the bell were the 2 white birds. They had thrown themselves against the bell to save the woodcutter who had saved them. Well, he picked them up in the palms of his hands, and their hearts still beat. So he tore the cloth from his shirt, and he wrapped their wings, and he cared for them, and he fed them. He stayed with them until they were healed. And one day, he opened those old stone doors and let the 2 white birds fly away free. And the woodcutter went home, and he lived safely and happily ever after. Thank you.
Many years ago and far away, there lived a man and his wife and their son. The man and woman were too old to work, and the young man worked as hard as he could to feed his parents. But the young man was not well. And every day he said to his father, how long must I work? And the old man would say, son, there will be something, a miracle one day that will happen, and you can come home and rest. One night, the old man watched the fire burn. And his wife said to him, why do you look so worried? The old man said, listen, can't you hear the storm? I have expected my old friend to visit tonight. The roads are too bad for him to walk the hill from the town. And just that moment, there was a knock upon the door. And the old woman rose and opened the door, and there, standing in the door, was the old man's friend, the sergeant major. Well, he said, woman, won't you kindly let me in? It's cold out here. Oh, come in, she said. She quickly ran to the kettle and poured a very hot cup for tea. The sergeant major quickly grabbed the cup to warm his hands and turned the cup to his lips. Oh, he said, it's a cold night. Oh, said the old man, come over here and sit before the fire. I thought the storm was too bad for you to walk to my home to visit. Oh, said the sergeant major, I may be an old man, but I'm a strong old man. Oh, said the old man, would you like some tobacco? Do you have your pipe? Indeed, said the sergeant major, but I am a little poor. I would like some tobacco. And the old man passed the tobacco tin to the sergeant major. He reached deep into his pocket for his pipe, and as he pulled the pipe from his pocket, something fell to the floor. He quickly looked around to see who saw it, pulled it up, and placed it back into his pocket. But the old man said, what was that? I saw that. What was it? Nothing, said the sergeant major. Nothing that you should concern yourself with. Just a trinket that I carry. But I've never seen anything like that. Let me see it. Why do you keep it a secret from an old friend? He placed his hand again into his pocket, and he pulled the trinket toward the fire. And he turned it first one way and then the other. And the old man said, what is that? I've never seen anything like it. What is it? And the sergeant major said, it is the monkey's paw. I have tried to give it away. I have tried to throw it away. I've tried to destroy it. And with that, he threw it into the fire. But the old man walked before the fireplace, and he said, look, it does not burn. And he quickly raked it from the fire. And he held it up, and he said, tell me about it. It's magic, said the sergeant major. It contains 3 wishes, but they are evil. Throw it back, my friend, throw it back. 3 wishes, said the old man. Does it work? Does it really work? You make the first wish, my friend, said the sergeant major, and you must make the other 2. You hold it high into the air, and you make your wish. If it moves as you bring it before your face, your wish will come true. I shall remember that, said the old man, and he placed it into his pocket. They talked of many things that night. The sergeant major got up to leave. As he crossed to the door, he said, throw it away. Throw it away. Throw it away. And as the sergeant major closed the door behind him, the young man walked to his father and he said, is this indeed what we have waited for? And the old man said, I don't know. If we wish for just a small amount of money, perhaps the evil will not be so great. The old man lifted the paw high into the air, and he made the wish. I wish for $200. And as he pulled the paw down before his face, it moved, and he threw it to the floor. The next day, the young man once again got up and walked into the town to the sawmill, where he operated a huge saw. That afternoon, as the old woman placed the kettle, waiting for her son to come home, instead, as she looked through the window, she saw a stranger at her gate. And she said, "Old man, open the gate. We have a visitor." And the old man opened the gate, and he said, "Come in. What is it? What business do you have?" "Oh," said the young man as he pulled his hat from his head, "I have news for you. There has been an accident. It's your son." And the old woman said, "My child, we tried to stop it. We tried. We told him to stop, but he walked into the saw at the mill. We could not stop him. It was as if by magic he is dead." And the old woman said, "My child, we could not be responsible for the accident, but we have taken a small purse to help you with the burial. Here is $200. And the next day, there was a funeral. And as they returned, the old woman said, "It was the paw. It was the paw that took my child away. Make it bring him back." "No," said the old man, "you do not know what you ask. Make it bring him back." And the old man obeyed. He lifted the paw high into the air. I wish that you would bring my child back from the grave." And as he brought it down before his face, it moved, and he threw it to the floor. And they waited. And on the other side of midnight, the candles had burned low, and the fire had gone out. And the old woman heard the screen door opening. And she saw the doorknob turning, and she said to the old man, "That's my child. He's come back. I shall open the door." "No," said the old man, "please, you cannot." And she ran toward the door, but this was a bad day and time, and there were many locks upon the doors. And the old woman started to pull the bolts from each lock. Just as she reached the very last lock, the old man said no, but he remembered one more wish. He fell to his knees in the darkness, and he searched for the paw. And just as she reached the very last lock, he found the paw. And she placed her hand upon the doorknob. And the old man raised the paw high into the air, and he said, "Go away, go away, go back into the grave." And she opened the door. But there was nobody there. But the gate at the end of the walkway moved up and back as if someone or something had just passed through. I must remind you, if at any time you should place your hand deep into your pocket and you should feel something most strange, throw it away! Throw it away! It's the monkey's paw. And that's the end of that.